Good morning, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin today in Lima, Peru, heading into the final day of negotiations at the UN Climate Change Conference. Leaders remain deadlocked. Thus far, officials have been unable to agree upon a final draft for the Paris Agreement. That accord is to be signed next year, and it is expected to include emissions cuts from all countries starting in the year 2020. The current draft proposal includes a variety of unresolved details. A major point of contention is whether wealthy countries should also pledge specific long-term financial resources to help poor countries develop clean energy and adapt to climate impacts. And staying with the climate change meeting, Secretary of State John Kerry, the U.S. Secretary of State, has acknowledged that the U.S. and other wealthy industrialized nations bear a special responsibility to set an example. He noted that over half of global emissions now come from developing nations, encouraging all countries to take action. A key point of disagreement is between rich and poor countries over whether developing nations should be forced to cut their emissions by the same amount as developed countries. The Regional Integration Organization, ALBA, has rejected U.S. threats of sanctions against Venezuela. The 9-country bloc issued a statement condemning the U.S. for the sanctions, calling them a violation of international law. In Caracas, former Honduran President Manuel Zelaya, along with dozens of intellectuals and representatives from Latin American social movements, also expressed their condemnation. Zelaya says that the recent actions by Washington are another attempt to undermine stability in the country. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro sent a reflective message to President Obama yesterday, urging him to respect Venezuela's sovereignty. In his letter, Maduro highlighted the resolve of the Venezuelan people and promised that Venezuela will no longer tolerate abusive foreign policy measures. Maduro also warned that sanctions will only worsen relations between the two countries. Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos will meet with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry Friday in Colombia. The two will discuss Colombia's ongoing peace talks. Kerry is expected to offer Washington's full support for a long-lasting peace agreement for Colombia. Now, in the meantime, in Cuba, peace negotiators are debating de-escalation of the conflict and the urgent need for a ceasefire. The internal 50-year-old conflict has left more than 500,000 victims in the country and led to the displacement of millions more.
Requiere como respuesta un trabajo conjunto y coordinado.
A decision by the Inter-American Court for Human Rights has found that the Colombian military has carried out forced disappearances and torture. The decision awards $7.4 million to the families of the victims. The disappearances occurred during the military's violent retaking of the Palace of Justice in November of 1985. The building had been overrun by 35 members of the now defunct urban guerrilla group M19. The aggressive military response left dozens dead, including nearly half of the country's Supreme Court justices. Scientists of the National Autonomous University of Mexico issued a detailed report Thursday refuting government claims that the bodies of 43 missing students were burned. The report shows that an enormous amount of fuel would be required to burn that many bodies. The government has claimed that the bodies of the students were burnt to ashes. Authorities did find one of the bags containing remains, and Austrian forensic scientists positively identified them as those of one of the students. And to Argentina, where a mass grave with 25 bodies has been found. Former military Major Ernesto Barreiro revealed the grave's location. It is estimated that between 13,000 and 30,000 people were disappeared, tortured, and killed under the Argentine dictatorship. Currently, there are 15 judgments pending in Argentina related to crimes against humanity committed during that era. To Washington now, where the House of Representatives has approved a $1.1 trillion bill to avert a government shutdown. The measure was approved by a small margin despite major pushback from Democratic lawmakers over several stipulations. A controversial aspect of the bill is that it expands the National Security Agency's spying abilities in the United States. The bill now goes to President Barack Obama, who is expected to sign it into law. The U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee approved a measure Thursday authorizing the use of military force against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. The measure also bars the use of ground troops. The 3-year authorization for use of military force would ban ground troops except in special circumstances. It also requires the administration to offer a report to lawmakers every 60 days. In a 10-8 party line vote, the panel advanced the legislation.
Agentes químicos deteriorados, cuyo descubrimiento se les pidió que mantuvieran.
According to a report from the Royal Services Institute of Great Britain, the Islamic State group has become the best financed extremist group in history. The group found that ISIS no longer depends as much from donations from rich benefactors in Arab countries as previously reported. The group has a yearly income of over $2 billion, mostly from extortion, kidnappings, control of smuggling routes, and the illegal sale of oil. In the U.S., CIA Director John Brennan has admitted that agency officials committed atrocious acts against suspected terrorists, but he also made an aggressive rebuttal of the Senate Intelligence Committee's torture report. Brennan says that the report is flawed and incomplete. He questioned the report's conclusion that the CIA tried to mislead the White House, Congress, and other policymakers and the media about the value of the program. The report revealed extremely cruel torture tactics by CIA officials that shed no results whatsoever in the fight against terrorism.
To our current national security challenges.
We end this morning in China, where former Cuban leader Fidel Castro received the Confucius Peace Prize for his contributions to world peace. Castro did not travel to China to receive the prize. He instead sent a Cuban exchange student in his representation. The prize co-founder says that while in office, Castro did not resort to violence to settle international disputes, especially with the United States. The Cuban leader was also praised for continuing his peace efforts even after stepping down as president of the island nation. More on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great Friday.